everyone. This is the Buttercup Podcast where we talk about early childhood topics. My name is Marisa Macy, and I'm the host of the Buttercup Podcast. I'm so excited today because I have a special guest coming all the way from Oxford. Dr. Charles Hulme is Emeritus Professor of Psychology and Education at the University of Oxford. Dr. Hulme has broad research interests in reading, language, and memory processes, and their development, and is an expert on randomized controlled trials in education. He has published widely and is in the top 2% for citations of all researchers in the field of education. He holds an honorary doctorate from the University of Oslo and is a member of the Academia Europea and a fellow of the Academy of Social Sciences. He was elected as a fellow of the British Academy in 2017. It's such an honor to have you here today. Thank you for being here, Dr. Hulme.
My pleasure, Marissa. My pleasure. Nice to be here.
Well, how did you get started in the field of education?
Oh, okay. So I went to Oxford as an undergraduate, and I studied experimental psychology. I loved that course, and I decided to stay on in Oxford and study for a PhD straight after my first degree. When I was deciding what to do for my doctoral research, I decided I wanted to do something with practical application. And I thought that increasing understanding of the nature and causes of children's difficulties would be useful. I also think I also thought that that should be a tractable problem, and I think I chose quite well there because I think it's both important and tractable. I think this is an area where we've made a huge amount of progress since I worked for my PhD there.
Yes. Well, and when I read your bio, you being in the top 2% is just amazing. For people in my classes, if you go into Google Scholar, you can see that Dr. Hulme has over 62,000 citations of his work. I mean, it's just so impactful what you do. And you're most known for your work in literacy. Do you want to talk a little bit about uh, the work that you do with children and reading and language?
Sure. If we sort of take a historical perspective on from my career, would say that the work that I do has changed hugely since my earliest studies. I started really with small scale experiments. I think my first experiment compared a group of 20 children with dyslexia and 20 typically developing control children. And these studies very much focused on trying to understand what I'd call the cognitive problems that characterize dyslexia, i.e., what are the sorts of problems in the mind or brain that cause children to struggle to learn to read. I gradually moved on to doing larger scale longitudinal studies, quite often with several hundred children, sometimes followed for several years. This was all about trying to identify whether things that were possible causes of reading problems developed or showed problems before reading developed, because that's one of the criteria for trying to find causes. And having found things that might be causes of reading problems, I moved on to studies of intervention and in particular got involved in running so-called randomized controlled trials, which involve now hundreds or even thousands or tens of thousands of children. And I guess finally now my work is entered a phase of what I call what people call implementation science. If we know that certain teaching methods that we have developed and evaluated in randomized trials work, the issue now is to get them adopted and implemented at scale while still trying to gather more evidence of their effectiveness. And this process of implementation gets quite complicated, and you're always seeking to optimize the take up of a program. And one of the things you're probably trying to do is to simplify things as far as possible, to make things as easy to use as possible in order that people will use them, whilst at the same time trying to maintain checks on whether people are still doing the program as you would wish them to do it.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Dr. Hume. And can you tell us what is OxEd?
Sure. OxEd stands for Oxford Education, and it's a University of Oxford spin-out company. That's a company that's partly owned by the University of Oxford and which is based on research conducted at the university. I founded OxEd in 2019, basically to translate the research our group had done on educational assessments and interventions into practical application that could be used by schools at scale. I'm pleased to say that I think this has been successful. We have a range of automated apps that schools can use to assess children's language and literacy skills, and a range of interventions that are proven to improve children's oral language skills and, as a consequence, also improve their reading. So, in terms of the scale of what we're doing, Ofsted is now working in some 10,000 schools in England and in many countries throughout the world, including the Netherlands, Paraguay, Australia, New Zealand, and in the US, where we are working with many hundreds of schools in some 32 states. And I should say, of particular relevance to your podcast, Oxford's delighted to be working with the Wyoming State Education Department on the CLSD grant, where we're going to work with the State Education Department to seek to improve language and literacy standards for children in your state.
Yes, yes, so exciting. Thank you for all your work here and beyond. It's so important to really invest in literacy development. And would you have, Dr. Hume, some suggestions for what early childhood professionals could do to foster literacy development in children?
Sure. I have a very clear answer to that, which some people might say is a little biased, but my view is that we really, early childhood educators really need to understand the critical role of oral language for the development of literacy. And therefore, I think there's little you can do that's more important in the early years than to focus on oral language development, to talk to children, to get them to engage in meaningful conversations with you, to read them stories and get them talking and discussing the stories with you, use rich vocabulary, play games with language, make language fun, make it interesting, and develop language in a fun, playful, but quite structured way. That's what our programs, I believe, do when they're implemented properly.
Yes, yes, thank you. And for children who are multilingual, do you have some ideas about ways we can serve children who have multiple languages?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I'd say, again, I'll state it very bluntly. Um, Multilingual learners are no different to anyone else, except that they have had less experience of the language of instruction at school. So these children are going to learn language in the same way as any other child, really. Um, I think one important thing is to always respect a child's first language. So if they come to school speaking another language, You should accept that language, value it, and that language forms the foundation for any other language that the children will learn. Children from multilingual backgrounds, however, do typically start school with poorer. If we're talking in the US and the UK, those children typically come to school with poorer mastery of spoken English than children from monolingual homes. And these children will certainly benefit from additional support in learning English. Um, the approach for those children is basically the same as the approach for other children who may have language learning weaknesses for different reasons. Work with the child at the correct level of difficulty, spend time explicitly teaching them vocabulary that's useful, get them to learn to listen and to language and to engage in conversations. I think a very critical aspect of learning language for anyone is practicing producing spoken language. So children do need to be encouraged to talk and be given feedback on what they're saying. The details of how we do that work are quite complicated and covered in, several hours training that we provide for people using our programs. But I think the principles are simple. I think the details of how to do it become quite complex and require very skillful work.
Yes. And as far as families go, what are some things that parents and families can do to promote literacy development in children?
Yeah, so families are important, and I think schools and educators can benefit children by communicating to parents about the literacy activities that are occurring in schools. We know that what's referred to as the home literacy environment is important for both language and reading development. In terms of school engagement, simple things like sending books home to read, for children to read with their parents, is a common strategy that engages the parents with what's happening in the school. Um, However, I would say that it's important to remember that many children who struggle with language and literacy skills at school will come from families who may have language and literacy difficulties themselves. And this may mean that those families are not well placed to help their children with language and literacy difficulties. I mean, in a way, this is why schools are so important, I believe, because schools potentially can serve to reduce the variability in children's experiences by giving everybody good literacy and language experiences in school. It compensates for the fact that some children are coming to school from homes where the language and literacy environment is quite impoverished.
And my students are the ones who I share this podcast with, and they're at the beginning stages of their careers. And uh, what's something that took you many years to discover related to literacy that you could share with someone who's new?
Okay, so that's a very simple answer. I'll use three words. Reading is language. We published a paper last year with the title Reading is Language. Language is the foundation for the whole of literacy. Without language, there is no literacy. So you need to understand how reading is really just built on an expression of a development of language.
That's beautiful. Reading is language.
Yeah, and we published a paper where we talk about the reading is language model, which is a developmental model of learning to read.
Yes, that's wonderful. Well, if you were to think of new practices or innovations in the field today, What are things that are exciting to you with innovations that are happening?
Hmm. Well, I've been talking about the importance of language for literacy for a long time. This might sound a little bit egocentric, but I am actually quite excited that educators in the US and in many other parts of the world are really now starting to understand that oral language skills, speaking and listening skills, form the foundation for literacy and actually form the foundation for much else besides in the field of education and also in children's development and life skills. So I think this importance of language is really taking a grip, and I think that's going to transform the field in the next 10 or more years.
Yes. Uh, last last week I was at Oxford, and one of the things that I didn't ever know was a tradition at Oxford is how college students are assessed. And there is a gorgeous building on campus, the examinations building. And so,
Examination school.
examination school, can you tell us what that is, Dr. Hume? I was so surprised to learn about this.
Yeah, it's a very large building on the high street in Oxford that fills all undergraduates with dread. When I was completing my degree, I went there and wrote 9 3-hour exam papers, unseen exam papers. It was very hard work, and everything everything depended in terms of the marks for your degree on those 9 examination uh, papers that you wrote.
Yes. So,
But it's a huge building and it's used a lot for conferences. So I guess you were there for a conference meeting. Yeah, yeah.
yes, and it's so interesting to me how we assess. And so much of the work that you have done is creating assessment strategies, tools, practices. And I'm really interested in your work with assessment. And when I was at the examination school, I couldn't help but thinking about assessment and how we assess people in college and university settings, how we assess children, and kind of going back to the origin of the word assidere from Latin, sit beside and get to know. And it's kind of like what you're saying, reading is language. And when we sit beside and get to know and assess, we can learn so much. And uh, could you tell us a little bit about your work related to assessment, Dr. Hume, how you got started, uh, what drives you in the field of assessment?
Sure. Um, I've published a number of um, assessment tools in my career. Um, Many years ago, I published a test of children's phonological abilities, which was particularly relevant to identifying and diagnosing children with dyslexia. I think the assessment that I feel we've developed that's most important is called Language Screen, which is an online assessment of children's spoken language ability. Because, as I've said, language is so important, teachers haven't traditionally had ways of assessing children's language production and language comprehension. So, Language Screen is an automated app that runs on a phone or a tablet or on a computer, and it involves measures of children's vocabulary, measures of their sentence repetition, measure of their listening comprehension. The important thing about it is that all the teacher needs to do is indicate in the app whether each of the children's responses is correct or incorrect. They're given very explicit guidance as to what is acceptable as a response to each question. And this gives them quickly a highly accurate and reliable assessment of the level of a child's spoken language skills. So we're moving to try to automate that further now by incorporating automatic voice recognition so that actually the teacher can just use the app and the app will hear what the child says and score it automatically from a child's spoken responses. But I think this assessment, we've got a similar assessment called reading screen, we've got another one called math screen, we've got a spelling screen that we're almost finished. All of these assessments make the job of the teacher much easier. I've got a lot of respect for teachers. They're very busy people, and everything we do, I guess, in one way is designed to try to make their work as easy as it can be, given all the demands on their time. So having something that's automated in its scoring, I think, is very, very important.
Yes, yes. The more we can help teachers with resources and tools and less burden and paperwork, the easier their life can be, and they can focus on the children and the students. Well, who is one person, Dr. Hume, who inspires you?
Oh gosh, Harry Kane. Do you know who Harry Kane is?
No.
The, the captain of the English football team.
Oh, okay. Do you want to say more about that?
Well, he's a great footballer and a thoroughly decent man, and he led the English team to a very good outcome in the recent World Cup. Although they didn't win, they certainly acquitted themselves very honourably, and I think he's a very good leader and a very skilled and clever footballer.
Yes, yes. And I think as an educator, we can look to coaches as inspiration for the work that we do. They lead on the field or in athletics in some way, and it's
Yeah.
so helpful to look at how people implement positive leadership skills and how other people can follow them and uh, be inspired by their leadership. Well, do you have a highlight of your career so far?
Oh gosh. Well, I think being elected to a fellowship of the British Academy was a very important milestone or reward in my career. And subsequent to that, the British Academy awarded me something called the Leverhulme Medal and Prize for contributions to understanding children's language and reading difficulties. So I think fellowship of that academy and the award of a medal by the academy were probably high points in my career.
Congratulations. That is so awesome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, how can listeners follow you?
Um, I think Google's a pretty amazing invention. If they Google my name, they can see my Google Scholar page, which will show details of all my publications as they're being accepted for publication. Also, if they Google on YouTube, there are rather a lot of lectures recorded on YouTube by me. I should say in some of those I look quite young.
Well, you have just been such an inspiration in our field, and thank you for all of the work that you do uh, to support teachers, educators, people who serve children, families, and parents. And you're continuing to uh, contribute to the field with the work that you're doing with OxEd. And we look forward to seeing you here in Wyoming soon. And thank you, Dr. Charles Hume.
Thank you, Marissa. Yeah, I hope to see you in Wyoming next year.